Hey guys, Coach here. Welcome to this week's podcast. Hey, I'm glad you took a few minutes to join me. This week we are talking about something that most recently is very near and dear to my heart, and that is the cost of plants. And as a result of the cost of them, how to do it correctly when it comes to planting. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started.
Hey friends, please check out the description for this podcast where you will find important links related to this video, links to the website, discounts, and much more. Also, don't forget, Yard Coach now offers personalized consultations to help you get your project launched and completed, or just answer your specific landscaping questions on a personalized level. See the website at youryardcoach.com for more details. Now back to this week's episode. Thanks for listening.
Hey, welcome back. Hey, thought I'd take a few minutes out of my daily tasks to sit and talk to you about this after we have invested several hundred, probably closer to $1,800 worth of plant material costs over the past 2 months. And putting these plants, these very expensive plants, some of them anyway, into ground that I'm not super familiar with. So I had to take a few extra precautions to make sure that I was going to have success and not death as a result of the planting process. And most recently, we ended up putting in some additional Parkland pillar birch out front, along with some fire chief arborvitae. And that cost alone, 3 trees, 3 bushes, $400 and some odd. I mean, gobsmacked. So, knowing the ground that I have out front, for the most part, up near the house is somewhat questionable. So what I did to kind of hedge my bet against any sort of failure was to take a few extra steps. And please pardon any sort of thunder or cracks of thunder that you may hear in the next few minutes, because we have a thunderstorm that's kind of rolling through. So hopefully it doesn't disturb the podcast. Anyway, so I took mini Bosch jackhammer, a digging bar, a shovel, and a whole lot of soil amendment, and made sure that the way I was going to go about it was the trees came in 10-gallon containers. So the hole was going to have to be twice as deep and twice as wide, with the ledge stone, rock, and other stuff, except for the little tiny kibbles and bits. I don't care about those. But the bigger stuff, they had to come out. So I had just about a wheelbarrow's worth of good soil left over from some of the raised beds. So as I extricated all the rock out and tossed them out in the forest, I used a few shovelfuls extra of the good soil mixed with a lot of planter mix, a 50-50 mix, and then getting them lined up and into the hole and level root ball, etc., caused me to have to really compact the bottom of that hole. Remember, it's twice as deep as the root ball. So if I just put it in there and covered everything up and tamped down the top, that loose soil underneath that root ball would settle over the course of the remainder of the year and forever until it compacted out, which would bring the root flare and the crown of the tree down below grade and would really risk crown rot and weakening of the tree tremendously. So, you know, I did it the way I've always done it, with some extra digging. And so far, after, let's see, 7 days now? 7 or 8 days? No, it's not that long. 5 days. We've had some warmer weather again. The front yard is a southwestern exposure, so it's a lot hotter. So by the time I got these plants in the ground, we're talking days at ground level that's probably approaching 100 degrees. Now the trees are up above the gravel mulch, and I planted these in such a way that by the time I put all the loose tailings from the dig of each hole into a wheelbarrow, mixed it all up with the planter mix, and then put it back on there, The technique that I have used in the past and I used this time was you had a lot more soil than you do hole, because obviously the root ball is taking up a good portion of that hole again. So what do? Well, tamp down the bottom really good, like I mentioned, and then come along and tamp down the sides really good. And then take the rest of the soil in the wheelbarrow and pour it right onto the trunk of the tree. And you're going to end up with this little miniature tree trunk volcano. And everything is all tamped down already. Then get down on your hands and knees, have some gloves. Ladies, if you have good nails, make sure you wear gloves. And just take that volcano and bring it down and out and create a nice picture perfect water basin. And firm up the hill of the water basin really nice. And it makes things so much easier. Instead of trying to scoop it out of the wheelbarrow and do a little dribble of soil in a circle, just dump it right on the trunk of the tree, and then take your hands and move it out away from the trunk and make some sweeping motions with your gloved hands into a nice circle, probably, for a 15-gallon or a 10-gallon tree, at least a foot out from the trunk in all directions. And that'll give you a nice water basin of which can capture rain if that's how you plan on doing it, but most likely hand watering or drip irrigation for long-term care. But once they're in the ground, do not rely on a sprinkler system or a drip irrigation system for initial care of plants in the ground. That is a hose dragging event that you have to go out and check fairly regularly and know what kind of soil you have and how much water retention does it have. If you have a real sandy soil, that perks through super fast, like you people up in Michigan, I hate you. God dang. They have such sandy soil, they can just take a shovel and dang near just shove it in the ground all the way to the handle. Yeah, not me. Anyway, it used to be kind of that way out west, but that's not the case anymore. So now that we have our very expensive trees and our expensive plants in the ground, now's the time to give them a super good drink and let that planting hole settle out, and a lot of the air pocket will naturally come out. You won't see it bubble necessarily, but you will see it settle a bit. That's why when you've placed that root ball in that hole and you've really compacted underneath that root ball, that you plant that root ball so it's actually sticking above grade about an inch and a half or so. And then this will allow for any future settling to grade, and you'll be good. Now remember, soil around the root flare and the crown of that tree. You want to be able to see that. And if you leave that root ball an inch above, you'll automatically be able to see it. And when that tree goes in the ground, we want to make sure that we've kind of roughed up the roots just a little bit. If it's a really, really super hot day, make sure that you watered an hour or 2 hours before it goes in the ground. And for me, what I did was I watered at 2 p.m. and I planted at 5 p.m. And I really did a thorough drink, because by the time transportation took place 45 miles away where I bought the trees and then got them home, they were kind of dry. And I needed them to be super wet going in the ground. I did not want to shock these trees at all. At 135 quid per, I did not want to lose them at all. So far, so good. The 3 in the backyard that I planted in June are looking fine. They probably put on maybe, 3 inches or so of some secondary growth for the remainder of their year. And the ones out front, a couple of little yellow leaves here and there, but up here in northern Maine, birch drop a few leaves in August. The native ones and ornamental ones do. They drop some of the older leaves off of the stems this time of year. The tops will still have new growth look to them and are kind of full and lush looking, but those bottom ones down there. So if you get a yellow leaf or two, don't freak out on the Parkland pillar birches and any other plant, because there is a natural stress factor that goes into a plant. And remember, I talked about this in one of the videos in the podcast earlier. If you think about what that plant has gone through to get to your house, it's amazing. You know, it's really is amazing. They go from perfect conditions to being shoved into their neighbor and crammed onto pallets and then shoved into trucks and tilted and leaned and bent and transported hundreds or thousands of miles to a nursery, which is a totally different environment from where they were grown in. And then they're shoved into a pickup truck or a car or whatever, transported X number of miles to a place they've never been, to an environment they've never been subjected to, and then they're shoved in ground that could be totally different than anything they've ever had. Imagine someone doing that to you. Yeah, you'd be a little shocky too. You may not have leaves to drop, but yeah, you may be feeling a little different. You know, take yourself from wherever you live and go put you on the top of Mount Denali Mountain up there in Alaska, 20,000 feet. Do you think you'd be in the same condition you were in your living room? Heck no. So think about that for plants as well. Now, something else that you can do, I did it for the backyard, but I didn't do it for the front yard because of a time crunch. But I followed up the next day, and that is feeding. Most of the plant material that you get from a nursery, a retail nursery, will not have had any food for quite some time. The potting mix that the tree or the shrub came in may have some slow release fertilizer in the pot. That doesn't mean that that's fresh though. That could be there from last year, and there is no more nutritional value to that slow release. And they do not fertilize at a retail nursery. Take it from my own experience. We're not going to throw those kind of costs into a retail plant when what we want is to turn that plant, sell it and get another one and turn it. You know, the old adage of turning your entire nursery 4 times a year is a very profitable nursery. Some do, some do not. But chances are your tree, your shrub, your perennial, whatever you bought, hasn't seen food in a while. So consider giving it a half-strength feeding of either a liquid fertilizer, or if you get some organic fertilizer, some dry, make sure it's a starter fertilizer and you mix it into the 50-50 planter mix and native soil when you're planting, and you'll really hedge your bets, because that plant material will definitely use it. Do not feed dry plants. Do not plant dry plants at all costs. The worst thing you can do for a tree or shrub is plant it dry. Chances are your ground isn't necessarily the same. And when a plant is in dry mode, not necessarily wilting yet, but it is dry, it goes into kind of a state of semi-dormancy. It literally, if its root ball is dried up, it cannot uptake very well at all. It cannot uptake water. So that's why we water hours beforehand, and then we water after planting, and we make sure that that root ball is thoroughly saturated and it is in auto mode as far as uptake of moisture at the time. It's got enough to worry about just being planted, having its roots all roughed up, shoved in the ground, planted hopefully correctly after this. It shouldn't have to worry about, God, I really wish I could get a drink, you know? So pay attention to that. It's my firm belief, and I'll stand on this adage to anybody who wants to debate me, and that is, Plants, just like food at the grocery store, have gone through the roof as far as inflationary costs. Not totally prohibitive, but it sure makes you think how much you need before you go buying nowadays. When I was in the retail nursery business, a 10-gallon or 15-gallon tree, like what I'm looking at in the backyard right now, was probably about, I would say, $69 to $89 max. Some of the fancy ones, some Japanese maples or something that was decoratively pruned into a spiral, yes, they were probably a little bit more. But holy cow, I mean, where I'm at, these plants here have come a tremendous distance to get to my yard. Thousands of miles, literally. They've gone from Minnesota to North Carolina to Connecticut to Maine to northern Maine. So they've had quite a journey. And it's like I got a new baby in the house again. And I do not take my eyes off them for a second. That's why we're not traveling this summer at all. This summer or fall, probably. We are going to maintain this investment and put this thing to sleep when fall ebbs into winter, and then we can exhale for the winter, and we don't have to worry about the plant material so much. We just have to worry about snow load and other stuff. But as long as it does a nice color up in the fall, I know it's not stressed. I know that the new growth on the trees are a good sign that they're out of shock mode. And next year, after they've had some new feeder roots and structure roots move out into that beautiful extra large size hole that I created, these things are going to explode next year. And I'm really looking forward to it. So consider the cost of the plants that you're forking your hard-earned money out, and then make sure you take every step, even extra steps, to create a planting environment that is really going to be a key to success and not failure. You can't take it lightly. When you leave that nursery, spend the extra dollars and pick up the bagged material, or if you have a bulk material place nearby that sells a good quality compost, any of those things, 50-50 mix of your native soil and plant it correctly. Leave it about an inch high or so and make sure that the plant gets its drink before it goes in the hole. After you have everything planted and mulched, go back through and water again. And then literally, if you're planting in the warmer months of summer like I was, make sure it's a daily check. A daily check. Even if you have rain, the storm that I just talked to you that just rolled through probably dumped, I don't know, maybe 1/10 of an inch of rain. And now my lawn chairs are all wet. In any case, make sure that you check them every single day. Do a second knuckle test. If you have plants that are very water dependent, like birch, like hydrangea, like hosta, ferns, they want to be moist all the time. So make sure that you pair up various plant material with like water needs. And your success will be just bangers. I mean, it will come along because you have done it correctly from the very get-go. And I'd like to leave you with this. If you're going to a retail nursery and you have any sort of relationship with the salespeople there, ask them if they have plant sleeves or tree sleeves. These are protective coverings that can get the plant from the nursery to home without it getting super wind whipped if you're putting it in the bed of a pickup truck. And believe me, they do get wind whipped if you don't. If you have a small cargo trailer, anything that's small and enclosed, take it with you and put your plants in that if you can. That's the ultimate. And if you don't have either of those, there's always the back of the car. You can lay them down in the trunk of a car. You can put them down on a protected back seat, which we've done in our pickup truck. On a 90-degree day, I wasn't going to put hydrangeas from the nursery in the back of a Line-Xed, rubber matted heat box of a pickup bed and then drive 45 miles in 90-degree heat. Nope, they went on the back seat of the truck. And the air conditioning was on, believe it or not. And those things rode in style all the way home. And then they got set aside for the remainder of the day in a shady spot, watered really good. And then the morning of planting, those hydrangeas got a little bit of food and they got put in the ground. They're covered in blooms right now. Very, very, very happy with the way they have responded. And remember, those were the rescues, the clearance from one of the box stores. So in any case, I wanted to impress upon you how expensive things are in the plant world nowadays and how to still have success by just really sharpening your pencil on your planting skills. That is extremely, extremely, more than ever before, important in this day and age. Hey, I certainly hope you got something out of this. Don't forget to drop me an email if you have any questions on planting technique or any landscape related questions. I appreciate you so much. Check it out over on the YouTube channel if you can, and make sure you tell a friend. Until next week, as always, to your landscape success, thanks and goodbye for now.